Hello, hello, and welcome back from our break. Let's go ahead and jump right into our next session, connecting meaningfully, crafting influencer strategies for lasting impact. I'm joined here today by Jayde Powell, content creator and marketer, and Nathan Jun Poekert, CMO advisor at Jun. Welcome to both of you, and I will go ahead and pass it on over to Jayde once she turns on her camera. Hi.
I've never done this before, so this feels like really new and exciting, but I love it. Hi.
Hi.
How are you? All right, y'all. Hello, hello. My name is Jayde Powell. I am a content creator and marketer, and I am very excited to be talking to Nathan Jun Poekert today. Nathan, how are you?
I am doing great. Excited to spill some influencer tea.
Absolutely. The tea is always needs to be spilled. So Nathan, as we know, the conversation today is officially titled Connecting Meaningfully, Crafting Influencer Strategies for Lasting Impacts. But I feel like just because this adds a little razzle dazzle, I'm going to call it How to Pop Your Influencer Strategy, just to give the girls what they want. So today I want to really kick off with my first question, which is who are some of the brands that you feel like have really been popping their own influencer strategies this year or just really doing really impactful influencer work? Because when I look back on the past 5 months, which is honestly crazy to think about that we're almost halfway through the year, there's been a lot of influencer campaigns that have popped up. And one of the ones I often think about is Topicals. And for those that don't know, Topicals is a Black woman-owned beauty brand. And earlier this year, I want to say at the top of January, they kicked off with this big influencer trip. They sent like 12 influencers to Ghana. And the whole trip just had me gagged because one, you don't really see a lot of influencers, one, going to Africa. Two, a lot of the creators and influencers that they hired were all Black, which I loved. And then three, I can successfully say that it was one of the campaigns that actually got me to purchase a product from a brand that I've never purchased from. So I'm curious to you, like, what are some of the influencer campaigns that you feel like have been really impactful this year or beyond?
Yeah, I actually had some different answers prepared when we did the run through before, and it's changed just in the past week.
Yeah.
Um, y'all, like Marc Jacobs is unhinged right now,
Love
and
it.
what they're doing is so shocking, and it's so insanely impactful. Like every post is viral, 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 and they're doing it the right way, which we'll talk a little bit later about authenticity, because they're just letting their creators like that they're partnering with just like do this content which is both entertaining but it's also like including product in a way that is just so genius. So like really go to Marc Jacobs TikTok and just see what they're doing right now because it's unreal.
Yeah.
The other one, I'm gonna give a shout out to my past employer, American Eagle, and specifically to Sarah Berkman, Sejal Shah, and Cara Dor, who are the PR influencer team there. They just did this campaign with James Lafferty, who is Nathan Scott from One Tree Hill. If you just Google James Lafferty, American Eagle, it's being covered by everybody. And it's so smart because we often talk about this idea that men's is a really, really difficult market to break through into, specifically in the retail space. And what they did was they kind of partnered with somebody who was female driven, but knowing that females actually influence male purchasing, it was just really, really smart. And it is being memed now. And I think if you're working in any aspect of influencer or social media, and if your content can be turned into a meme, you have crushed it. You have absolutely crushed it.
Yeah, even going back to the Marc Jacobs work that they've done, because that's what I've been watching on TikTok lately. I think it's so funny how they just like leverage these creators and influencers that are just having these really great moments, which I feel like is a sign that they're paying attention to trends, which we love. But one of the things I've noticed is that they're both using influencers and creators, which is
Yep.
great. And I feel like we can't really dive into this conversation without like deciding what the difference is. And in the work that I've done, I've really seen that the difference between influencer and creator really comes down to like one specific delineation. And to me, that's intention. Creators are there to create content that could be photography, written content, short form videos. Influencers I really see them as like amplifiers. They're there to take a brand campaign message and like spread it through their audience, ultimately getting someone to eventually purchase or engage with the brand service. So, what does that differentiation look like for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm jaded because I've worked in this industry now for almost 17 years. So like I'm so tired and exhausted by the influencer creator. Can we define what they are? But like for the sake of this call, if you're not familiar, I'm gonna nerd it down what you just said, which was done a little bit more interesting, but it's like look at influencer as media extensions and look at creators as extensions of your creative team. Creators make content for your brand to be able to post in both your organic and paid social. Influencers are amplifying your brand to their audience.
Yeah. And do you think there is a time where a brand would want to work with creators only or influencers only or a little bit of both?
You have to have both
Yeah.
in this day and age. You absolutely have to have both because I think we all know now that audiences don't want to, specifically on social media, they don't want to look at branded assets anymore. That you have to trick your audience into understanding that they're looking at an advertisement for your brand, both on paid media and an organic social, and it has to be entertaining.
Yeah.
And yes, you can do that in-house with your creators. We all know like the best in class brands that are doing that with in-house teams, and you can also see lots of brands hiring in-house content creators who are literally just there to shoot TikTok and Reels videos all day. But you have to have both right now. And again, you have to look at one as additional firepower for your content creation team and one as just other means of paid media.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done that in my own work as well. Like I remember I used to work for this beverage brand as their head of social. And anytime we would have like a big product launch, we'd be like, okay, who are the influencers that we're going to work with and who are the creators that we're going to work with? And what we found is like influencers, again, were like really these amplifiers. When we wanted more people outside of the people that were just following us to know about our new product, we would engage them. They're the ones that are like doing the live demonstrations of what the products look like, how they feel, how they can be enjoyed. And then the creators were literally just like creating UGC content for us, creating photos, video clips that then we would go and then turn those into like social ads, email content, or even content for our website. And we just found it really helped with the brand campaign outside of like those like creative shoots that we did that were a little bit more high produced. So definitely agree, if you're not considering both, you should be.
And one thing to add on to that as well is that you need to really, really consider added value in your influencer contract agreements where they make content that is unique both to their channels and to your channels. So a really good example of this is to have them create a Reels or a TikTok video, but then also have them provide you with still photos.
Mhm.
Because if the post goes viral, like it's really, really hard for an email marketing team or a web team to be able to add that as a screen grab because the quality is just really not that great. But if you have a photo of that moment, that way you can actually include that as part of your contract agreement. And you generally don't have to pay that much more because it's just considered like an add on.
Mhm.
We're paying you to amplify our brand on your kind of channels, but we would like to have supplementary content for our own channels to consider to use for our marketing usage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially now that Reels has kind of said that like regrams and reposts are no longer going to be elevated in the feed, and TikTok does that as well.
Yeah.
So like you can't just use their original content. So you have to have original content to be able to kind of further that message.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I remember like when the need for UGC kind of came about. Like I want to say this was around like 2021, we started seeing a lot more creators really capitalizing off that moment. Like I think I saw creators who were literally their entire portfolio was UGC content that they were taking on their phone and they were like making like between at least 500 to 2,500 a month, which is like a nice additional income for a lot of like smaller creators. But it's definitely something that I feel like has changed the industry, because even now when I'm like, working on campaigns with brands and I see that, they want to do that like really great big production shoot, which I do think is necessary, especially for like a stronger digital presence. The UGC content or just like the content created by creators in comparison always performs better. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it speaks to that like more human element, especially now that we know that consumers are like more savvy than ever. They know when they're being marketed to, like you said, and it's something that like I've seen to be perform really well, which I love. Yeah. So one of the things I want to get into today, and we've talked about this before, is the topic of inclusion and authenticity. And I know authenticity is one of those like big buzzwords that's going around the advertising industry right now, which we love. There's many, but that's one of them. So I wanted to ask you, what do inclusive and authentic campaigns look like? What are some examples that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, authenticity is like the synergy of 2024. It was all anybody could talk about during social media week. And it's fine because it's still the foundational aspect of authenticity is really still really important. But like, I think we need to kind of look at authenticity as more about like what makes sense and what seems normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's like like we all know that like at this point, if you're an influencer marketing professional, you're hiring them for their content and you're hiring them because you already believe that they are aligned with your brand. So just let them create authentic content. Just let them create normal content because in the end, like you want them to also trick their audience into knowing that they're looking at a branded post. Um, in terms of inclusion, you know, this is really, really for US only. So if you're kind of in a different part of the world right now, like I'm going to talk specifically to the US market, like we're at a place now where the United States is 40% BIPOC.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even have to like have this like mission. You don't need to have this like, quota at this point. If the audience in the US is 40% BIPOC, you can just say, okay, you know what? 40% of our influencers and creators also just should be BIPOC and they should just also be diverse. Take the same stats for people from other, like I don't want to say marginalized, but other like minority communities like LGBTQ. Look at the male female quotient of like your own brand and who your customers are. Like the easiest way to make your brands more inclusive is just to understand that your audience is also diverse and cater to that audience.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too, because I feel like this always gets to the topic of like, what does that look like year round? And I remember in some of the work that I've done and work that I've seen other brands do, it's like there's always this instinct to like leverage the cultural heritage month. So Black History Month, Women's History Month, Pride, AAPI Heritage Month, whatever that looks like. And that's like the only time that they want to work with creators and influencers. And I understand it from an editorial standpoint, but I'm just like, there's opportunity to leverage those kinds of creators year round, and that's how you begin to like create a more inclusive environment when it comes to working in creators with creators and influencers, because it's not just these moments that are kind of like one off where you're just like, okay, tell me your story, goodbye, I'll see you next year. It's like you're really thinking through how can we pull in these creators year round. And it's interesting too, because something that I've talked to about with other Black creators is this idea that like, once we work with them, it's like done. And then you also don't hear how they're working with Black creators like across the diaspora. So just in the US, and they're not thinking about Africa or the Caribbean or other places that Black creators might be. And I feel like that translates across communities. It gets very like US centric sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean that's really important just because if we're looking at Black History Month, Pride Month, API Month, Latinx Month, like you need to be planning for these things months in advance. Like the worst thing is being I think the worst thing that can happen is you are already in Black History Month and
Yeah.
you are reaching out to creators on February 2nd, you
Yeah.
know? Like and I think that like one of the biggest things you can do is it's a year round. Inclusivity is year round. It's not just a specific month. You need to celebrate that month, but the key is celebrate. Like like I hate the word highlight when brands say the word highlight or spotlight.
Yeah.
I think it's such like oh, we're just doing this for this moment. Like inclusivity is a year-round event, and I have this free idea if anybody works in social who wants to hear this, which is for Pride specifically. Like, and I've been trying to do this for a brand for a while now, but like on July 1st, post something about how Pride is year-round.
Yeah.
Pride Month is over on June 30th. Post that it's a year-round event. That's how you build inclusive marketing practice, not just regulated to influencer or social.
Yeah. And another thing I'll add to that is like it's always interesting because when we do have these moments where the cultural heritage months are being focused on, it always seems like the content that they want us to create has to be geared towards like an activism lens. And I'm like, maybe I just want to create content around the food that I enjoy. Like it doesn't always have to be like, be the activist, talk about your Black power, your Black pride, or your queer pride. And I'm just like, it goes so much, beyond that. Like we're very multifaceted people. We have a range of interests. So to like even pigeonhole us in that way is problematic as well. It's like, it's not just that you're like tying us only to these specific months throughout the year. It's then you're kind of dictating the type of content that you want us to create, like you said before, which feels very inauthentic.
Yeah, and with that, you can combine those things together of
Mhm.
authenticity and inclusion. We talked about authenticity being just normal content, and then inclusion being, making sure that your marketing is reaching the audience of the demographics of where you're targeting. Is that like it isn't like if we're looking at pride because it is coming up, so I'll talk about it. Like it's not why the influencer is proud of being gay,
Yeah, yeah,
just highlight them. You know what I mean? Just
exactly.
just like allow them to do what they normally do, but
Yeah.
now they're getting a brand sponsorship. And say like we want you to there's certain things that we want you to talk about, but the brand should not be or the campaign should not be like, why I'm proud.
Mhm.
It's such like it's like an ick factor.
Yes, I get that. And I think it too touches on like the idea of intersectionality. It's like, some people, some brands I feel forget that people are like very multi-layered and complex again. And it's something I've even seen with myself working with campaigns. Like I'm Black, I'm queer, I'm a child of immigrants, I'm Caribbean American, like I'm all these things. And it's so interesting because I'm like, instead of just like allowing me to create content that shows how I exist in the world and what, my view of the world is through that lens, you're like, be the activist. And it's something that
Yeah.
I don't want to be pigeonholed. And I know a lot of creators feel the same way. But again, it's like if you do want to create more campaigns that are inclusive, think about those things. Think about, the range of experience that people have. And again, try to like get out of that US centric lens because it's only harming you in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to get to is which is honestly one of my favorite subjects, is securing the bag, money. And it's always a topic that I have with other creators, or a conversation that I have with other creators, just because I feel like that's how we're, supporting our lifestyles and getting paid. So I really want to get into the topic of compensation. And I feel like we can't talk about that without talking about like pay discrepancies. And, we were just talking about inclusivity, of course, but one of the things that we often hear is that there are often pay discrepancies between creators who are white versus those who come from underrepresented communities. And it's funny because if you're not following Miles Worthington, please do. But I like to quote him because he always calls them underestimated audiences. But of course, this always leads to the topic of pay transparency. So, in your advice to brands, what are some of the accountability measurements that brands should really be considering when it comes to compensation for influencers and creators?
Yeah, great question, because I think we've all seen like a TikTok post where an influencer talked about they were paid significantly less than another influencer
Yeah.
who was doing the exact same work, and they have similar followings, and simply because they're part of a minority or a marginalized background. Um, my recommendation that I make even to my clients is you have to come up with an internal kind of this is what we pay based off of like a baseline. This is what we pay based off of the reach and the anticipated reach and engagement. I don't love looking at follower count. Follower count is such a vanity metric these days. But like if you look at their normal branded content that they do and you base it off of like this is what we anticipate the reach is, and you create a value against that, you can create pay parity. I'm not going to say transparency because you can't just broadcast how much you're paying, but you can create pay parity by going to another creator and using that same formula, to ensure that they are getting paid at a parity level based off of what their anticipated reach and engagement is on their content. So that way, if you have one, and this is really, really the key point, because you have to you have to level them up as well.
Mhm.
Like there are too many creators that I have worked with who will come in lower than what I know they actually deserve. And you will go to them and be like, actually, for this, like, we want to pay you more. Now, you can negotiate things like an additional Instagram story post. You know what I mean? You can negotiate things like a TikTok story post. You can negotiate things like content for yourself. But you need to make it so that what they are getting compensated is level.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the best way to approach this. Because again, this is how you create inclusive practice for your influencer.
And also, create an environment where there's pay equity amongst creators. Like you were just saying, that's something that I really have prided myself on doing. Like when I'm working with influencers and creators, I'm making sure that everyone is making around the same amount, or if they're asking for more, there's negotiation amongst deliverables, like you just said, just because it's like some creators genuinely do not know what they should be making, because it's like the industry is chaos. Like there isn't really standardized rates. If you ask someone, what should be the rate for a short form video that's under a minute and 30 seconds, you'll ask one brand, they tell you something, and then the other brand tells you something different. So that can be really confusing for a lot of people. So I think that conversations that really encourage people to be a little bit more transparent, but also that internal accountability when you're working within the brand is helpful, because it does foster that environment of pay equity, which I love.
Yeah, and I mean, a really, really easy way to do this is, and this is a little bit of a hot take, is include what your budget is and what you're willing to pay in advance, and also say, we base this based off of, include links to 4 recent branded content posts that they've done and the reach and engagement you received on these posts.
Yeah.
Because I think we've all seen creators who have 1 million followers on Instagram, but you'll look at it and you're like, well, why do your reels only get 30,000 views on them?
Yeah.
So if you go to them and say, we base this based off of the number of anticipated impressions we're going to get from your content, if they come back and say, no, that's like 1/4 of what I normally charge, then walk away from the agreement. If they come back and say, can you come up a little bit? Go up a little bit. That doesn't mean you have to go to the other creators and go up, because you've already given them your pay transparency. Pay transparency is coming from you, the brand or the agency who is going to them. And you really want to do this again, because creators also talk to each other. Creators regularly will DM somebody and say, hey, so-and-so brand just reached out to me. I know they just worked with you. How much did you charge them? And that is how they will operate. Yeah. So it is in your best interest to base it off of whatever you want to consider to be your baseline metric. But also, if you do this based off of anticipated value rather than just vanity metrics, you also get to budget properly as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have one more question, and time for enough. But I want to continue the conversation of compensation, but on the brand side, when you look about how brands are budgeting for the year, what is something that I guess you feel like is a good consideration to have when they are planning out what that money looks like?
A really good question. So traditionally speaking, influencer has been lumped in with social media budgets, which is a mistake. I have a period, mic drop, exclamation point, all the things about that. Influencer is an upper funnel paid media channel now. It is, you really have to look at it as that. And the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace right now is brands are investing 13% of their marketing budgets towards influencer. So I would encourage every brand to look at your paid media budget and start with 13%. You might actually need to do more than that depending on what brand you have. You might actually find that influencer is the best way and you'll go up from that. But if you're looking at your overall paid media budget and you're not allocating at least 10%, you are behind the market.
Yeah. And I would even add, just to allocate a little wiggle room for fuck ups. Oops, excuse me. Sorry, y'all. For mess ups.
Yeah.
Just because I feel for brands that are doing influencer marketing for the first time, there's going to be a chance that they're not doing it right, immediately. Because to kind of test and learn in this space. So just allow for a little wiggle room in your budget to move budget around if needed. Maybe some creators need a little bit more money, or you need to pull back in some spaces. But I think having that wiggle room will actually be helpful.
Yeah, you absolutely, just add on that. You really do need to have a kind of supplementary budget or just a discretionary budget for the year, which is for culturally trending moments. Or specifically, if you can tackle a creator who has low following as they are going viral and you can grab them, but it wasn't in your plan, you have to have that. Like in the case of the Chick-fil-A creator, the first brand that was going to tackle them was going to win.
Yeah.
It's like, and for a lot of brands, you need the ability to be able to have your influencer team email you as a CMO or a VP and say, this is happening. I think we have a tremendous opportunity to tackle on it, but I need to like get an approved budget to be able to go into it right now.
Yeah.
Because that is how you go viral on TikTok and Instagram. And that's how you actually get a ton of earned media as well.
Yeah. So for all the executives that are always like asking their social media manager how you go viral, that's the T. And you got it from Nathan right there. So I know we have about 5 minutes left, which gives us a little bit of time to answer some questions from the audience. Sarah, you want to cue that up for us?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for your transparency and your vulnerability, both of you. It has been such a pleasure to listen in. And I do have some questions here. They have been coming in fast and furious. So the first one is from Ashley. They say, so in contracts, should influencers create videos posted on their account and a similar but different version for a brand account? What do you each recommend?
It depends on, again, going back to the beginning, if they are a creator or if they are an influencer. Right now, TikTok and Reels are deprioritizing regrams, and their AI is recognizing if content has already been posted. So if you need them as a media channel, they post first. And then you would basically request that they send you their raw assets for you to be able to possibly rework it so it feels like an original video. Please staff your team internally with video editors, everybody. But like that is kind of the approach that I would take. If they are if they're a content creator, a lot of questions that creators ask when they're content creators are, can I post this on my feed? You say yes, but they have to let you post first, because otherwise the algorithms are going to push your content down.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same. I think if you're a creator, it's usually that you don't even need to post on your own personal channels, because I feel like that crosses over into influencer territory. So usually, even as a creator in my own right, I've been creating content and it never even touches my feed. People that follow me will never even see it because it goes directly over to the brand and they're using it for their own channels, not even just social, just digital channels in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, like, and that brings up a good point too, as well. I know we're short on time, but like, if you're a brand leader on here, please stop forcing your social teams to repost influencer content.
Yeah. Heavy on that.
Jayde, along those questions, along your answer, excuse me, we actually have a question from someone who's part of a digital agency. So they have a client who uses one creator specifically to provide the content in-house, but they said, a majority of their content includes this person's face, their POV. So speaking to authenticity, it's starting to feel like the content has sort of tipped from authentic to redundant because it's the same person creating. So what are your thoughts and advice on this?
Yeah, I think if you're a brand and you have the resources, try to hire multiple creators, because it's almost like, you're working with different strategists. Someone is going to have like a different point of view or a way that they even shoot content, which is going to look very different. So I think like, if you want to switch it up a little bit, maybe you have someone that's focused just on capturing content of your products. Maybe you have someone different that is completely the on-screen personality. And maybe you have someone that does a little bit more educational content. Having that little bit of diversity between creators, I think, is helpful. So that way your content doesn't look so monotonous and like the feed of the person that is creating the content, because there should be a delineation there.
Yeah, I love that. Nathan, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to say that, I think Lululemon does a really great job at this because they have 3 in-house creators who do a lot of their green screen content. And they kind of rotate them in and out, and it kind of creates it, and they all have different personalities. I think the different personalities is the key aspect to it. But if you're going to make somebody the face of your brand, that's okay in theory, because people on TikTok specifically follow creators. They don't love following brands. So, but to Jayde's point, you just have to have a really, really strong difference in the content you're posting.
Yeah, and if
Oh,
you are going to have someone be the face of your brand, pay them extra for that because that's
Yes, please do.
yes, yes. Oh man, there are so many questions. Please share them on LinkedIn. All right. And I really appreciate you both so much for sharing your expertise, your perspectives, spilling that tea. Thank you so much.